Okay, good to go. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I just want to get my video started. Okay, there we go. There I am. Okay, everybody, it's 9 o'clock. I'd like to welcome everyone to the last day of January's Black Creek Oyster Bay Services Committee. And with respect, I'd like to acknowledge that we are on the traditional territory. I'm on the territory of the Lakwitak First Nations, and most of you are on the Comox band's traditional territories. So with that, we'll begin the meeting and the content of the meeting. We have public input report on the financial plan from staff. So yes, if we could have the staff present their information.
Thank you very much, Chair Lee, and welcome Director Grieve. This is the first of our meetings with the BCOB, the Black Creek Oyster Bay Committee, to consider the financial plan. And at the start of every meeting, we just inform you of any public input that we've received that's relevant to the plan. So far, there is none. But I just wish to make it clear to the public that if you have any input on the plan or require any information, it's available at our website, and on our agenda, we have the link there for you. So we welcome public input on these matters. Today, we'll be starting the process of reviewing these plans in detail, and it's just that statement I have at this time.
Thank you. Is there any discussion from the committee regarding the information received? None. So may we have receipt of that report, please?
I'll move receipt of it.
Thank you, Director Grieve. And I'll second. Any dissent? Hearing none, we go on to reports. Oyster River Fire Department Strategic Plan 2022 to 2024 for receipt.
Move one for receipt.
Second. Any dissent on that? Hearing none.
Thank you very much, Chair. And Bruce Green, the Fire Chief for Black Creek Oyster Bay, is here to present a brief report on this and answer any of your questions regarding their strategic plan.
Thank you. Chief Green.
Thank you, Russell. I'm through the chair to the directors. I'm pretty sure, have you guys been shown the strategic plan?
I saw it online.
Okay, so the idea, what it was is, as you're aware, we're in the Oyster River Fire Department's in a state of growth with taking on some new services. So we thought, myself and the department thought it would be a good idea to come up with a plan so it clearly outlines where we perceive ourselves going for not only the firefighters, but the politicians as well as the community. Our plan is to make this a living document so we can make adjustments as needed. It shows us where we want to go, what we need to do to get there, how we're going to get there. The next steps for us is we have a meeting coming up on Friday where we're going to introduce it to the fire department, and then we'll post it on our web page so the public can see it as well. With that, without showing it, which you've already seen, do you have any questions about it and why we did it, or any of the items in it?
Thank you, Chief Green. Any questions, Director Grieve? Hearing none. Oh.
And through to through the CAO to Fire Chief Green. I just want to commend the excellent job you did on this report. It's very professional. I think it's you say it's a living document, so I think, you know, as far as going forward, we've got the really good building blocks there. Certainly, the picture says it all. It's a good-looking fire department. So, I mean, we're very proud of you guys, and we sure hope we can all work together on the political end, on the staff end, and of course, the fire department itself, moving forward on these big initiatives.
Thank you, Director Grieve. And I would just like to comment as well that it was a very professional, beautiful report, beautiful photographs. On the last page, page 21, I counted 57 in the picture. So I don't know where your volunteer count stands at the moment, but it looks like you have very healthy organization going, and congratulations, Chief Green, on the production of this document. It's really excellent.
Thank you. And with that, I want to thank Jennifer Steele from the Communications Department. She was a huge asset to us in helping us make it look the way it is. She worked with us to find contractors to do the stuff we need to do. So thank you very much to Jennifer for helping us make this possible.
Thank you. So is it true you have 57 volunteers, or is there more?
Right now we're at 75.
Wow.
Plus the three career chiefs. So 78 in total.
78 volunteers. Amazing. Thank you. Okay, so we have received the report already, and now we can move on to the proposed financial plan budget presentations. We have a report from Kevin Duville, Manager of Financial Planning, to introduce the 2022 to 2026 financial plan process.
Move Kevin DeVille's report.
Second, any dissent? Hearing
Thank
none.
thank you very much, Chair and Director. And Kevin is on the line and will outline this report for you, the plan, and be available to answer your questions, supported by staff.
Thank you very much, Russell. Through the chair to the directors, good morning. So yes, this is kind of the more or less official kickoff of the public consultation phase of our annual financial planning process. So I have just a really brief presentation to share with you, and then certainly we'll be more than happy to answer any questions. So bear with me one sec. Hopefully everybody can see the presentation. So this is just kind of outlining what to expect over the next several weeks as we roll out our service plan budgets to the various committees and commissions. So of course, starting today with the Black Creek Oyster Bay Services Committee, and then subsequent to this meeting, we'll be doing a similar rollout to our Electoral Area Services Committee. As I reported to the board this past week, kind of the theme overall for this year's financial planning process is celebrating accomplishments while continuing to plan for long-term sustainability on certain times. And that's really a recognition of the directors coming up to the final years of their terms and looking kind of back at the many things that have been accomplished over the past 3+ years, but also continuing to look ahead to the important planning that we have to do, fiscally and otherwise, with respect to ensuring that we can continue to create long-term sustainable services, given certainly the uncertain times we continue to find ourselves in. So to provide just a real quick overview of the process, the proposed 2022-2026 financial plan is now posted online. People can find it at the link that's provided on the slide at the bottom there, www.comoxvalley.rd.ca/current budget. That will take them to the current budget site, and that does include the full overall financial plan for the Comox Valley Regional District, including these services that fall under the purview of the Black Creek Oyster Bay Services Committee. Over the next several weeks, once we kind of go through each of these meetings and budget presentations, we consolidate all of the comments, direction, etc. that we receive, and then we include that along with looking at our 2021 carry forwards of various things like work plan items, surplus figures, etc. And then we kind of update all of those as our annual year-end process, getting ready for audited financial statements is concluded. We also take a look within that meantime, have any grants information come to light? Are we aware of any grants that have been approved or statuses that have been updated? That will all then get reflected in the next iteration or stage of our budget, which is our recommended financial plan. And then that financial plan is what gets rolled up into our annual budget bylaw and gets presented to the Comox Valley Regional District Board for approval prior to the legislated deadline of March 31st. And lastly, just wanted to note that directors may notice that the budget staff reports will look slightly different this year. Where appropriate and where we felt it was applicable, we have tried to present rather the budget reports in a more concise and consolidated way. This is in an effort to ensure that the directors, while you continue to get that key critical information and key messaging that you need to make your deliberations and your decisions, that we're keeping things as concise as possible, just given the immense number of services that you'll be kind of presented with over the next 7 weeks. And then lastly, I can quickly show, those, in attendance, the budget dashboard. This is a dashboard we present every year that kind of gives everybody kind of a sense of the full breadth of the number of service that we're presenting and what meetings those will be hitting. As this slide indicates, anything that's listed with a yellow dot on the dashboard will be represented on today's agenda. Anything with a red dot will be something that will be coming up at a future meeting, and then anything with a green dot, and we update this regularly, will be those budgets that have already gone through the various committees and received that approval. So for this particular committee, the next meeting date for budgets will be February 14th. So at that time, we'll be bringing back the Black Creek Oyster Bay water budget for your consideration. And then, of course, for electoral areas, that'll be the 7th of February. So I'll perhaps quickly show you the dashboard, and then I will turn it back over so we can begin the presentation of the budget. So bear with me one moment. Here we are. So again, hopefully everyone can see the dashboard. I do apologize, it is a bit small, but given we are now trying to present 101 services to the various committees, but you'll get the general gist that we kind of do break it down, based on which committee they're attending. So for example, today you'll see here Black Creek Oyster Bay Services Committee, and of course what's coming forward very shortly is the Black Creek Oyster Bay Fire Service budgets for your consideration. So I will certainly leave it there and then turn it back to our CEO so we can get into the budget presentations.
Thank you very much, Kevin, for your report and your excellent written report. Can we have a motion to receive? I don't think we received it yet, did we? No.
We do have a motion to receive.
We do? Okay.
Yes.
And we voted on it. Okay, that's good. Are there any questions or comments for our financial planning officer? A manager, pardon me. Any comments? I would just say that it looks good, Kevin, that there's no increase to the total requisition. I'm just concerned a little bit about the shift by the BC Assessment Authority in increased assessments. Very marked increased assessments for some properties, so that although a residence valued at 600,000 will be taxed at about $268.44, there will now be, and I'm not sure the impact of the assessment shift on Black Creek Oyster Bay residents, but it could be that a lot of people are, I'm not sure what percentage in the service area, will be paying double the 268. So we'll be paying more than 500 for the service. And so that was my first question. Do we know what percentage of residences are valued at, say, double the 600,000? How many people are going to be facing maybe a more than $500 bill on this budget?
Through the chair to the director, so perhaps Chair Lee, James Bast, our manager of fire services, will be providing a brief presentation on the financial plan, so he can certainly speak to some of that. With respect to the number of residents, based on their individual assessments, I don't, unfortunately have that specific information at hand. I can, certainly indicate to you that, with this particular service, I mean, obviously, what you will shortly see is, it is being presented that, as a bit of a kind of a combined report with, not only the Black Creek Oyster Bay service, but also our Greater Merville and Mount Washington service. But of course, all of those three services are now paying their appropriate share towards the overall costs associated with operational of the Oyster Bay Fire Service, and that's really being kind of split based on those assessment bases, and we will be updating that one more time before we get towards the revised assessment roll going into 2022. But certainly, we are recognizing that there has been some pretty significant shifts in assessment between 2021 and 2022. We're certainly taking note of those.
Yep, Madam Chair, I'll just add that we recognize that there's a sense of panic in the community when assessments increase by so much. But increased assessments do not mean that we will be taxing more. Our tax rate our need for taxation is on the basis of the service, and that's relatively unchanged. We'll see that through the budget. What matters to people is the relative increase or decrease compared to other people in the assessment area. If your property goes up on the basis of the average, you will pay approximately the same based on last year. If you're less than the average increase, you'll pay less. And if your property values increase more than the average increase, then you're likely to pay a little bit more. So it's that relative assessment that counts, not the overall change in assessment.
I know. I was just asking if anyone could give me a scope on the relative assessments. I know Area D, we've been told as a preliminary that our assessments are up 45% on average. And I don't know what it's like in Puntledge, Black Creek, or Maryville or Mount Washington, but I imagine it's probably the same assessment increases, but I don't know for sure. So I was asking. The other question I have is, we know we have two major purchases coming up in the 5-year plan. One is for a $600,000 fire truck, and the other is for breathing apparatus for 2023 for $245,000. This is a double-barreled question. Do we have reserves being built up to purchase the fire truck so that we don't have to rely on too much borrowing to purchase it? Because last time we purchased, we had cash in hand and we got a really good deal on the fire truck by paying upfront for it and not having to borrow. The other thing is, would the directors be able to use any of our gas tax funds for purchasing the breathing equipment?
Madam Chair, thank you. Very good questions that James Bast will address. He is going to do an outline of the entire financial plan and will address those matters with respect to the capital purchases. So
great. So he has a preview of what I want to know.
Yeah, and if he doesn't answer your questions or any others, he will be available to do that. But let's give James the chance to present that. Thank you.
So we've received Kevin's report. Thank you. And we can move on to the next report, which is the Fire Protection Services Function 230 Financial Plan 2022 to 2026.
Move the financial plan.
Second. Any dissent? Hearing none, it's carried. And James.
Bear with me just 1 second. There we go. Okay, Lisa, are you able to pull up my PowerPoint presentation?
Yep. Yeah, I'll do that. Thanks, James.
Thank you. Right on. Thank you. Right on. So thank you through the chair and the CAO to the directors. What I'll be presenting today is the Black Creek Oyster Bay Fire Protection Service financial plan, the proposed at this point. What I've also done is, for clarity, we've included the Maryville and the Mount Washington services, just so that we can see how these three services are connected in certain ways and yet completely and independent from each other in financial ways. So with that, next slide, Lisa. So a quick overview is we have essentially stable tax requisitions which are required for the service to maintain that service level for the citizens in the area. We also have, in following policy, we also have clear financial separation of the individual services while still being able to share operational resources that provide for efficiencies and economies of scale. We have within the three services contributions to reserves in preparation for planned purchases in the future, and each individual service has its own financial capital reserve planning. We have shared allocation costs for a financial services review that is planned for 2022 to address some regulatory changes that are occurring in the background and at a provincial level. And so it's best that we, as a local government, prepare our fire services for these regulatory changes. So with that, Lisa, next slide. So the Black Creek Oyster Bay fire protection. Just a quick snapshot of the proposed budget at this point. The residential tax rate within this proposed budget is sitting at 45 cents, about 45 cents per thousand of assessed value. You'll note that that is actually a decrease. In 2021, it was 63 cents. And so that decrease reflects that our financial planning is based on the needs of the fire service itself and not connected or based on the assessed values. So the, for example, residents with an assessed value of 600,000, the estimated tax for the year would be $268. Our requisition is the same as it was last year, 775,000. Recoveries from other functions. This is a key one. The recoveries from other functions of 191,000, almost $192,000, is a direct reflection of the cooperation between the three services, Merville, Mount Washington, and Black Creek Oyster Bay. So these are recoveries that Black Creek is going to be receiving from these other functions. Personnel costs of 280,000. That's actually a decrease of 26,000. Again, a direct reflection of the efficiencies found in sharing resources with the other services. Operational expenses has a slight increase. Contributions to reserves. We continue to plan for capital purchases in the future. And our capital equipment for this upcoming 2022 is 43,000 that we plan on purchasing equipment this year. Next slide, Lisa. Now, in this one here, I'm including, again, it's just for information purposes for this committee, but a couple of the key pieces that I'd like to highlight in this is, number one is the personnel costs, your fourth bullet down. In Merville's case, the personnel costs have increased, and that is a result of sharing of the resources, the management resources from Oyster River. Another key piece that I'd like to highlight in Merville is the transfer to other functions, and this is 158,000, almost 159,000, that is going to the Black Creek Oyster Bay service for those shared resources. The rest of the other items are specific to the greater Merville. Lisa, can I have the next one? Perfect, thank you. And in this particular case, it's the same idea. I'd like to highlight two specific ones. Number one is the personnel costs. They're for Mount Washington. The personnel costs have increased by $9,000, almost $10,000. And that is a direct result of sharing the resources with Black Creek Oyster Bay. This particular one here is the transfer to other functions. You can see that $32,816 is the transfer to the Black Creek Oyster Bay Fire Protection Service. And with that, last slide, Lisa. With that, there's, I believe that's your 57 firefighters, and we're staff is available to answer any specific questions that you may have.
Thank you, James, very much for your great report and questions or comments from Director Grieve.
Thank you, and once again, thanks, James and Kevin, and I guess you know that you can't ask for much better than this. When you talk about keeping a flat or trying to keep as flat a rate over the year from last year, when we're looking at inflation in December, I think running pretty close to 7%. You know, this isn't going to go on forever. So I think, you know, it behooves us to pinch every penny we got, and great to see that that has not lost on our staff. So I don't think the general public is too aware of how we've kept costs down over the pandemic. But you know, obviously, I think the CAO made a very good point that it doesn't necessarily, the increase in assessed value doesn't necessarily mean an increase in your taxes per se. But I know that in answer to Ben Lee's query, my taxes went up 51% this year. So I'm hoping for the ribbon cutting ceremony at the Merville Fire Station so that I can go into my insurance company and say, you know, I don't want to pay $2,000 for fire insurance anymore. I got a fire truck just down the street here, you know. So I'm hoping that works out with the you know, the having the new departments in the area. They will bring relief to the taxpayers on a different level. So I think, you know, we can't guarantee that, but I think that has to be stressed time and time again, that we're not out to make more money just because your assessment went up. So congratulations once again. I think this is a really great preliminary budget moving forward, and I will certainly support it.
Thank you, Director Grieve. And I just have those two preview questions that I put to mistakenly to our manager of financial planning. I just wanted to know how much we've got in reserve towards purchase, or how much we will have towards purchase of the new fire truck, which is $600,000. And if there's any possibility of financing the breathing apparatus through gas tax funds rather than through the requisition. Those two questions.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I'll respond to the second question and ask Kevin to look at the figures for you. And while he's looking that up, just on the matter of the gas tax funding, by all means, community works funding, it's often referred to as, that it is possible now for us to utilize that. But I would suggest you might want to look at all the services that you share and where are the pressures, because as we've witnessed, this is one where we are being able to keep and maintain taxes at a relatively stable level and still make some of these key purchases. Whereas we might have other services that are under a little bit more stress and pressure that might better benefit from the use of those community works funds. But by all means, it is possible for you to direct them, and a partnership could be established between Strathcona and this regional district on the services that we share. So Kevin, can you speak to the reserves?
Certainly, Russell. Thanks so much again through the chair to the director. So yes, Chair Lee, we do maintain two reserves for this particular service. We maintain a future expenditure reserve and then a capital works reserve. Part of the year-end process will be to update and finalize what those reserve balances were at the end of 2021. But I can certainly let you know that going into 2021, our future expenditure reserve had a balance of about 120,000, and then our capital works reserve slightly higher than that at about 135. And then we did have capital reserve contributions over the course of the year, and certainly further contributions to each reserve planned over the next 5-year financial plan. With respect to the potential funding mix, with respect to a major piece of equipment like a fire engine or a fire truck, we always take a look at what's the most kind of appropriate kind of combination or mix of funding that we could put available. Certainly, as our CEO just alluded to, now that fire apparatus and fire hall facilities are eligible for community works funds, that's certainly an option. But again, I will certainly echo the CAO's comments that we have to look at kind of overall what are our ultimate priorities and where would we be best situated to be placing some of those commitments. Certainly debt is a viable option we look at as well. So it's really that mix of looking at reserves, looking at debt, grants if they're available, such as community work funds and others, to put forward what we really feel is a solid business case supported by the life of the asset that's in question.
Thank you. And I would just like to say that given the instability of the financial markets with respect to interest rates, like I would like to try to keep this service away from borrowing too much because things may change vis-a-vis the amount we have to repay. And I know it's only a 5-year borrowing, but things are getting pretty unstable in our economy right now. And I feel that the less we need to borrow, the better off everyone's going to be in the long run. So I don't know if we can find other sources of revenue for purchasing the breathing equipment. And then it looks like we've got you said about 160,000 in reserve at going into 2021. So we probably have half the purchase price of the fire truck already in reserve, assuming that we're going to use that reserve money to purchase the fire truck. Am I correct in thinking that, or are those reserves not allocated to things like the purchase of the fire truck? Are those available, the reserves for the fire truck purchase?
So through the chair to the director. So yeah, we do look at kind of the purpose of each of those reserves that we maintain. So for example, our future expenditure reserves, I mean, as much as those can certainly be used for capital, they are really designed to kind of deal with those one-off kind of extraordinary expenses, particularly with if we ever had an insurance issue and we needed to pull a premium, or if we ever had a legal issue and we needed to pull some resources to cover those costs. So we do like to maintain a minimum balance in those reserves to make sure we can cover any of those types of costs. And then certainly, as I said, we do have a modest reserve kind of set aside currently for capital, but certainly nothing that's in the tune of being able to fully cover the cost of a fire truck at this time. And again, we do want to make sure that that's available for not only projects that may be over the next 5 years, but certainly from an asset management perspective, available over the long term. And that's why we look at that kind of equity as to what makes the most sense depending on who's going to ultimately get benefit for the particular asset going forward.
Thank you. Are there any further questions or comments? I think it's a pretty good financial plan. Hearing none, are we ready to vote on the adoption of the approval of the 2022 to 2026 financial plan?
Madam Chair, I just got my hand up.
Sorry, excuse me, sorry.
So
yes, Director Grieve?
Thank you. I was just going to ask a question through to James. I know when we started this endeavor with community fire halls, we had situations where the different fire departments were actually using different hose coupling systems, so they couldn't even hook up to the other fire department's hoses. Now I think we've all standardized that, and part of the rationale that we used was the fact that we would use our economy of scale when purchasing things like breather apparatuses, not only to make sure they're consistent across all the departments so they're familiar with each other's equipment, but also when we're doing major purchases like this so that we can actually go to the market with a bigger request so we can possibly get better value. So I'm just wondering, is this being all looked at through that lens? And obviously, we're having to buy equipment for the Merville Fire Hall, and then later on for the Mount Washington one. So, are we looking at combining these acquisitions so that we get the best possible deal?
If I may, yes, through the chair and CAO to the committee, yes. Every avenue is explored with regards to economies of scale. And yes, all of the hose couplings for the fire departments do match. And yes, we're doing the same SCBAs for Merville as we are for Oyster River. And so, yes, all of those economies of scale are being leveraged as best as possible. Very good question.
Music to my
Thank
ear.
you. Thank you. Great question. Okay, so we have now the recommendation for the financial plan to be approved. Could I have a motion?
Moved.
Second? Any further discussion or questions just before we vote? Hearing none. I'll call the question. Any dissent? Hearing none, the budget is approved. The fire departments. And moving on, or our fire department, Oyster River. Moving on, we have any new business? No addendum, media questions. Don't see any media around. Now we have a motion to go in camera. There's a recommendation printed out to go in camera.
So moved under 91K.
Thank you, Director Grieve. And I'll second that. And call the question. Any opposed? That's carried. And I just wanted to hear from the staff as to whether we need to sign out of this meeting and in